I have a husband who lives a double life, and now I want to expose him. Me and Daniel have been married for 8 years. We met at a mutual friend's engagement party and instantly hit it off. He was charming, intelligent, and magnetic in the way that everyone found him hard to be around. We became inseparable, and he proposed within a year. I was convinced that he was the love of my life. We had a whirlwind romance, which still continues to date. The first few years of my marriage to Daniel were nothing short of amazing. He was an attentive, thoughtful husband, and seemed genuinely invested in building a future together with me. We moved into a beautiful home in the suburbs where we welcomed our first child, followed by our second child 2 years later. To everyone around us, we were the perfect couple with the perfect family. As the years passed, however, small fissures began to emerge in what appeared to be a perfect relationship. Work began to consume more of Daniel's time, and he started to become more and more withdrawn. He was always coming home late, claiming he had been held up by meetings or business dinners. I wanted to believe him, to trust the man I had built my life with. But the signs were there, and they were getting harder to ignore. Changes in his behavior came to my noticing. He never left his phone unattended, thus became secretive with it. When queried about the long shifts and late night, he tended to offer vague and dismissive replies. "It's just been really busy," he would respond while avoiding looking me directly in the eyes. You know how it is. I wanted to have faith in him, to have faith in the fact that our marriage was as strong as it had always been. However, there were signs that were too glaring to ignore that were making me uneasy. There was too much time for him to wall himself away in the office for too long. The previously mentioned business trips were also becoming too frequent. He was always going out of town on them. Things started changing one day when he came back home later than he usually did. My husband came home with his shirt half out, his tie in disarray, and his face looking rather drained. I was in the living room waiting for him. Once he walked through the door, he leaned over to kiss me on my cheek. He messily whispered that he'd had a late meeting before making his way upstairs. I couldn't help but worry about what was going on with him. With the passage of time, I began wondering what could have possibly gone wrong. I kept replaying those moments in my mind over and over again, searching for hints that could help me figure out the mess. The reality is, I kept overriding all those boring little pieces of information, but when stacked together they were quite alarming. Such information, if paid good attention to, could turn out to be quite revealing. I want, and in fact, need to get the answers. If you're not following our channel, you might never see it again. But if you're subscribed, congratulations. You will always have access to check the most interesting stories you want to listen to or watch at any time. The following morning, as Daniel readied himself for work, I commenced my investigation. My first step was going through his study, which has always been a restricted area for everyone else. I began going through his desk drawers. Seeing receipts, business cards, and other documents was stirring inside me a sense of guilt, but I suppressed it. I needed to understand the whole situation. Initially, I came across nothing skirting the boundaries of the ordinary: bills, work papers, and other dull items. Unfortunately, I did not expect more from the drawer. Nevertheless, I scanned through and stumbled across a small leather-bound item at the bottom of the drawer. To my relief, it was not his regular planner or notebook. Rather, it was more personal and older. My hand started to shake as it flipped through the pages. The journal included accounts and notes involving meetings and events which seemed to be personal in nature. However, the kind of meetings which were written down were completely different from what he spoke of to me. These were not professional meetings. They were romantic rendezvous that he went to with someone. The entries brought to account intimate dinners, weekend escapades, and various tender moments which he shared with someone designated as Liam. I felt my stomach churn as I read through the entries. Within that journal was a life he had been living unbeknownst to me, a life in which there was someone else. I was devastated. There was a devilish fury fighting to seep out inside me as I collected pieces of that journal. This was not just an affair. Daniel was not only a cheater but was my partner in a sincere relationship situated alongside our life. But who was Liam? And how long had this been going on? Firstly, I required more insight before bringing the issue to Daniel because there lies the risk of him turning the situation in any way possible, turning the truth around. I had to appreciate the possibility of slowly having my reality encroach upon me. The excuse I drew from my very own diary was insidious. What I truly required were facts that could not be twisted to suit any means or reason. Facts which were cold and hard. Over the next couple of days, I took a deep dive. I looked through Daniel's phone log. I searched through his emails and even his work calendar. It was painful, intrusive, and deeply disquieting. But I had my reasons. I had to understand the full scope of his betrayal. What I found out sent a chill down the back of my neck. He was very active, not just with messages, but also calls with Liam. He even did so when he claimed to be at work, or very late at night. They spoke in code, hinting at meetings and business travel that was obviously more than just work. There were photos too, photos of them together, head over heels in love, smiling and holding hands. He claimed he was visiting places for work, places I had never been to tag along. Then I found it, a lease agreement for an apartment downtown. The tenant names were Daniel and Liam. This was the proof I needed. He wasn't just having an affair. He was living a double life, feeling a sudden upsurge of emotions, fueled with anger, sadness, and betrayal, gave me a grim sense of determination to believe every word he uttered. Daniel had been living a lie, and in order to sustain that facade, he had me and my children live in that lie with him. It turns out, he had built an entire world outside his marriage without the intent of me ever finding out. But now I knew that wasn't true, and there was no chance in hell that I was going to allow for that lie to slide. I knew what my next steps were. However, I was aware that if I ended up confronting him too soon, there was a higher chance of him denying everything, attempting to twist the situation in his favor or worst case, gaslight me into questioning my psyche. I had to come up with a plan that made him face the truth, devoid of illusionary exits to escape from. Beginners had the tendency to only rely on theory instead of action, but in this case, collecting every single shred of evidence that I could find would pay off in the end. From copying the lease agreement and phone records to photos and journal entries, I was meticulous about documenting everything to create something that would expose the full extent of his betrayal. In addition to this, I made contact with a divorce lawyer to get an understanding of my legal rights, knowing full well that if this was destined to end, it would be on my terms. All the while, I continued pretending to be the unsuspecting wife. I pretended to be glad whenever he walked through the door, created conversation around his day, and made sure that the routine continued without a hitch. It hurt so much to maintain the facade when I was mad, deep down, but I understood that I had to do this. To manage his suspicion, I had to ensure he didn't think that I was aware of anything. Then, Liam came along. Who was he in all of this? Was he also another passive victim of Daniel's web of deception just like me? Or was he part of this life Daniel was leading? I need to figure it out. I need to know exactly what Daniel has done on my blind side. I was able to find Liam's information through Daniel's phone. I was furious and scared, at the same time, as I called him. As much as I wanted to prepare myself for the conversation, the only reasonable thing I felt that I needed to do was to listen to his side of the story. Upon picking up, Liam sounded very businesslike until I introduced myself. I'm Daniel's wife. My name is Anna. There was an awkward silence before he sharply drew in a breath. Wife, he repeated, although it came out so quietly that it was almost a whisper. Wife, what do you mean, wife? My heart skipped a beat. Does he not know about me? Is it possible Daniel did lie to him too? Yes, I said, still trembling. I'm his wife. It's been 8 years. We have 2 kids together. At first there was dead silence on the other end of the line, but then for Liam brought some sort of noise. I had no idea. He told me he was divorced. He said he was raising his kids alone. Anger, sorrow, and a nauseating sense of betrayal rushed through me all at once. Not only Daniel had spun a web of told faux reality, full of betrayals and manipulation directed towards me, but also around Liam. A narrative where he is the devoted father, the man who was wronged in a past relationship. That's how he got over it. Need to meet you, Liam said abruptly. We should have a conversation. I decided to meet Liam at the downtown cafe, although details remained completely hazy. In his conversation, was I hearing the very truth? Or was he also a pawn in Daniel's lies? All sorts of unrelenting, furious thoughts rushed through my mind. After months of choking underneath the thick mist of betrayal, I was finally perceived towards Liam, who had undoubtedly been concealed from myself for so long. When arriving at the cafe, I noticed Liam was already seated with his face puckered with pain and confusion. He sat at the corner table, utterly lost in his thoughts until the moment we exchanged glances. And at that moment, we knew that we didn't need to say much more. We had both been fooled by the same liar and had paid the cost in one form or the other. With no delay, Daniel uttered, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. The very moment I had taken my seat, skepticism clouded my mind, and I chose to examine him closer,